I never expected my father's death to feel like freedom. Call came on a Tuesday morning while I was preparing for a client meeting, my desk covered in spreadsheets and coffee-stained receipts. My name is Callie, and until that moment, I thought I had my life figured out. Married to a successful real estate agent, working as a senior accountant at a respectable firm, and living in a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Perfect on paper, just like my father always wanted. Callie, honey. My Aunt Fiona's voice cracked through the phone. Your father. Alaric had a heart attack last night. He's gone. The world didn't stop. My coffee didn't spill. Instead, I felt an odd sensation, like a weight lifting from my chest while simultaneously crushing it. When? I managed to ask, my fingers absently straightening the papers on my desk. They found him this morning. The neighbor noticed the newspaper hadn't been picked up. Fiona paused. He was in his study, Callie, working until the end, just like he always did. Course he was. The great Alaric Hartman wouldn't dare die anywhere else. I could picture him there, slumped over the antique mahogany desk where he'd spent countless nights reviewing my report cards, circling every A- in red ink. I'll need to tell Malcolm, I said, more to myself than Fiona. My husband would want to know immediately. He always insisted on being the first to know everything. Honey, there's something else. Fiona's tone shifted. Your father's lawyer called. There's going to be a reading of the will. He was very specific about who should attend. I almost laughed. Even in death, my father was orchestrating everything, controlling who could and couldn't participate in his final act. When do I need to be there? Friday. The funeral will be Thursday afternoon. She hesitated. Callie, are you okay? I'm fine, I replied automatically, the way I always did. I just need to make some arrangements. As I hung up, my office door opened. Malcolm stood there, perfectly pressed in his charcoal suit, his concerned expression already in place. Sometimes I wondered if he practiced these moments in front of a mirror. Everything all right, sweetheart? I was passing by and heard you on the phone. Course he was. Malcolm had an uncanny ability to appear whenever I received important calls or emails. He called it being attentive. Well, I tried not to think too hard about what I called it. My father died, I said, watching his face carefully. Heart attack. His expression shifted from concern to calculation so quickly I almost missed it. Oh, darling, I'm so sorry. He crossed the room to embrace me, but his next words went straight to business. We should call Mom and Dad. They'll want to help with the arrangements. And we'll need to contact the lawyer about the estate. I pulled away slightly. Aunt Fiona's handling most of it. The funeral's Thursday. Thursday? His brow furrowed. I have that big showing at the lakefront property. The Hendersons are flying in specifically for it. You don't have to come, I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came out. I can handle it. Malcolm's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Don't be ridiculous. Of course I'm coming. Family comes first. I'll just reschedule. He said it like he was making a great sacrifice, and I supposed he was, in his way. The Hendersons were potential million-dollar clients. But something in his tone made me think of my father's study, of all those red-inked A-minuses, of expectations and control wrapped in the guise of care. I should get back to work, I said, gesturing at my desk. I'll need to clear my schedule for the rest of the week. Malcolm nodded, kissed my forehead, and left, already pulling out his phone. Probably calling his mother, I thought. They'd be planning how to handle this situation before I even had a chance to process it. I turned back to my spreadsheets, but the numbers blurred before my eyes. In their place, I saw my father's study, that massive desk, and wondered what secrets it might hold now that he was gone. The funeral home smelled like artificial flowers and judgment. I stood in the receiving line, accepting condolences from people who hadn't spoken to my father in years, while Malcolm hovered nearby. his hand possessively pressed against my lower back. "Your father was such a principled man," Mrs. Henderson from the garden club said, clasping my hands. "He never wavered from what he believed was right." That was one way to put it. Another would be stubborn as a mountain. The last time I'd seen my father alive, we'd argued about my decision to switch firms. He called it disloyal. I called it a career move. We'd both said things we couldn't take back. Aunt Fiona appeared at my elbow, rescue written all over her face. "Callie, honey, we need you in the study for a moment." I extracted myself from the endless line of mourners, ignoring Malcolm's questioning look. The study was mercifully empty and cool, my father's presence lingering in every leather-bound book and polished surface. "You looked like you needed air," Fiona said, closing the door behind us. "And maybe this?" She pulled a flask from her purse. I laughed despite myself. "Dad would have hated that." "Your father hated a lot of things." Fiona took a sip before passing it to me. "Doesn't mean he was right about them." The bourbon burned going down, but it helped. "Did you know he kept every report card I ever got? Found them in his desk drawer yesterday. All those red marks. He kept other things too." Fiona moved to the bookshelf, pulling out a worn photo album. "Look at this." The album fell open to a picture I'd never seen before. Me at maybe 6 or 7, fast asleep on my father's chest while he worked at his desk. His free hand rested protectively on my back, and his expression— I'd never seen him look so peaceful. "He wasn't always good at showing it," Fiona said softly, "but that man loved you more than anything in this world." The study door opened, and Malcolm stepped in with his mother Lorraine close behind. "There you are, sweetheart. People are asking for you." "We're having a private moment," Fiona said, her voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. Lorraine's perfectly painted smile didn't waver. "Of course, but there are proper ways to do these things. The guests need to see Callie being strong, maintaining appearances. Alaric would have wanted that." "Don't pretend you knew what my brother would have wanted," Fiona snapped. I closed the photo album carefully, my fingers lingering on its worn cover. "It's fine. I should go back out." Malcolm took my arm, but I pulled away, needing space. His jaw tightened, that familiar tell of controlled frustration. Back in the main room, the whispers followed me. I caught fragments, "married so young." And just like her mother. The last one stung. My mother had died when I was 4, and my memories of her were more impression than fact. A laugh, the smell of vanilla, warm hands. "Your father-in-law and I were just discussing the house," Mrs. Peterson, my father's neighbor, said as I passed. "Such a shame to think of strangers living there." I stopped short. "What?" "Oh," she fluttered her hands. "I just assumed you'd be selling. With you living across town and all." "We haven't made any decisions yet," Malcolm cut in smoothly, appearing at my side. "These things take time." Of course. Mrs. Peterson nodded sympathetically. "Though, if you're interested, my nephew is in real estate." "I handle all our family's property matters," Malcolm said, his professional smile firmly in place. "We'll be sure to keep everyone's interests in mind." I looked at him sharply. When had my father's house become our family's property? But before I could speak, Fiona called everyone to attention. It was time for the eulogy. Standing at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, some genuine in their grief, others just here for the show, I realized something. Everyone here thought they knew exactly who my father was, who I was, what should happen next. They all had their scripts ready. But as my hand touched the photo album in my jacket pocket, I wondered if any of us really knew the whole story. And for the first time since that phone call, I felt something beyond grief or relief, curiosity. The day after the funeral, I found myself alone in my father's study, surrounded by cardboard boxes and memories. Malcolm had insisted on coming, but a client emergency pulled him away, probably for the best. I needed space to think, to breathe, to process. I started with his desk drawers, methodically sorting through decades of my father's life. Tax returns, insurance policies, everything organized with military precision. Classic Alaric Hartman. The bottom drawer stuck. I yanked harder, and it finally gave way with a crack, sending me stumbling backward. A false bottom. Of course, my father would have a secret compartment. The man who triple-checked my homework would never be completely transparent. Inside, I found a leather portfolio and an envelope with my name written in his precise handwriting. My hand shook as I opened it. "Dearest Callista," it began. He only used my full name when something was serious. "If you're reading this, I've failed to tell you what matters most. Portfolio contains my updated will and a letter explaining everything. The house, the investments, my entire estate, it's yours with one condition. It must remain solely in your name." I read that line 3 times. Solely in my name? I've watched you disappear piece by piece since your marriage. You remind me of your mother in that way, trying so hard to be what others want that you forget who you are. I made the same mistake with her, trying to shape her into someone she wasn't. By the time I realized my error, it was too late. The study door creaked open. I quickly folded the letter as Malcolm walked in, his emergency apparently resolved. "Any progress?" he asked, surveying the boxes. "Mother suggested we could have her interior decorator come by next week. Start fresh." "We're not redecorating," I said, my father's words still ringing in my head. "Not yet." Malcolm's smile tightened. "Sweetheart, you can't keep it as a shrine. We need to think practically." I stood up, the portfolio clutched to my chest. "This isn't our house, Malcolm. It's mine." "Of course it is," he soothed, reaching for the portfolio. "I just meant—" I stepped back. "Don't." Something flickered in his eyes, that same look he got when I declined his family's holiday invitations or suggested separate bank accounts. "What's that you're holding?" "Dad's will. He left everything to me." "Well, that's wonderful news." His smile returned, calculated and warm. "We can finally start that investment project I've been talking about. The lakefront development." "No." The word came out stronger than I expected. "The inheritance is in my name only." That was his condition. Malcolm's facade cracked. "That's ridiculous. We're married. What's yours is mine." "Is it?" I thought about the photo album, about my father's letter, about all the times Malcolm had made decisions for us without asking. Like how my career is yours to manage. My time? My life? "You're being dramatic." He reached for me again. "You're grieving. Let me handle things." "Like you handled my promotion opportunity?" The words burst out before I could stop them. "I found the email you deleted. The one offering me the senior position at Crawford and Mills." Malcolm's face hardened. "That firm's across the country. You weren't seriously considering it. That wasn't your choice to make. Everything I do is for us, for our future." His voice rose slightly. "Your father never understood that. He filled your head with these independent notions, but marriage is about unity, about trust, about control." I finished, suddenly seeing everything clearly. "Like how you tracked my phone, monitored my emails, managed my social calendar?" Malcolm stepped closer, his voice dropping to that reasonable tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. "Callie, you're upset. We should discuss this at home where Mother can help us sort things out." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what my father must have seen. A man so afraid of losing control that he'd smother anything that threatened it. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'll stay here tonight. I have more sorting to do." His jaw clenched. "This isn't over." As he stormed out, I unfolded my father's letter again. "You're stronger than you know," it continued. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." For the first time in years, I believed it might be true. I spent 3 days at my father's house, sleeping in my old bedroom and avoiding Malcolm's calls. On the fourth morning, Aunt Fiona showed up with coffee and a determined look in her eyes. "Your mother-in-law cornered me at the grocery store," she said, settling into my father's leather armchair. "Apparently, you're having a nervous breakdown." I snorted, taking the coffee. Did she recommend her therapist again? Among other things, Fiona's is narrowed. She mentioned Malcolm's looking into power of attorney options. For your own protection, of course. Coffee turned bitter in my mouth. He can't do that. No, he can't. But the fact that he's trying. Fiona leaned forward. "Callie, what's really going on?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Another email from Malcolm, this one marked urgent. I opened it, then felt the blood drain from my face. "He's frozen our joint accounts," I said, my voice hollow. "For my own protection. To prevent any grief-driven financial decisions." Fiona cursed under her breath. "How much do you have in your personal account?" "That's just it, I don't have one." Malcolm said it would be easier to manage everything together. The words sounded so stupid now. "He even has my paychecks auto-deposited into our joint account." "Of course he does." Fiona pulled out her phone. "Call your bank right now. Then your work. Change your direct deposit information. I'll contact my lawyer." As I made the calls, my hands shaking, I remembered all the little moments that had led here. The joint account suggestion right after our honeymoon. The shared passwords for convenience. The tracking app he'd installed on my phone for safety. My phone buzzed again, Lorraine this time. I declined the call. "The lawyer can see us this afternoon," Fiona said. "But first, we need to check something." She led me to my father's study and went straight to his desk. "Your father mentioned something last Christmas about keeping documents in the safe. Said you might need them someday." "What safe?" Fiona moved the painting behind his desk, revealing a wall safe I'd never noticed. "The combination is your mother's birthday. Inside, we found a manila envelope labeled Elizabeth's Trust. My mother's name." With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Oh my God," I whispered. My mother had left a trust in my name. A separate account I'd never known about, managed by my father all these years. The balance made my head spin. "Smart man, your father," Fiona said softly. "He knew someday you'd need an escape route." My phone buzzed again. Malcolm had sent a text. "Mother and I are coming over. We need to discuss your recent behavior." I showed Fiona the message. She squared her shoulders. "Perfect timing. Let them come." "I can't face them right now." "Yes, you can." Fiona gripped my shoulders. "You're not that scared newlywed anymore. You're Alaric Hartman's daughter and your mother's too. They were both fighters in their own ways." I thought about my father's letter, about my mother's hidden trust, about all the quiet ways they tried to protect me. "I need to make one more call." Crawford and Mills answered on the second ring. "This is Callie Hartman. About that senior position, is it still available?" 20 minutes later, Malcolm's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the study window as he and Lorraine emerged, their faces set with concerned determination. They had their scripts ready, their plans in place. But for the first time, I had something they didn't expect: options. I touched the trust documents in my pocket and thought about my father's words. "You're stronger than you know." He'd been preparing me for this moment all along in his own rigid, protective way. "Ready?" Fiona asked as the doorbell rang. I straightened my spine, feeling something shift inside me, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known existed. "Yes, I think I finally am." Malcolm and Lorraine swept into the study like they owned it, their concern a perfectly rehearsed duet. I stood behind my father's desk, Fiona a steady presence beside me as they took their positions. "Darling, we've been so worried," Malcolm started, his voice honey-smooth. "You're not answering calls, making rash decisions, like protecting my inheritance?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Lorraine stepped forward, all maternal concern. Sweetheart, we understand you're grieving. That's why Malcolm had to take precautions. These kinds of decisions shouldn't be made in emotional states. What decisions would those be? I asked, my hand resting on the trust documents. The job offer I accepted? Or the separate bank account I just opened? Malcolm's facade cracked slightly. You what? Crawford and Mills offered me the senior position again. I start next month. That's across the country, Lorraine gasped. Malcolm, did you know about this? His laugh was brittle. She's not serious. Callie, you're upset about your father, I understand. But this theatrical rebellion needs to stop. Rebellion? I pulled out my father's letter. Is that what you call independence? I call it ingratitude, he snapped, mask finally slipping. Everything I've done, everything we've built, and you're willing to throw it all away? For what? Some fantasy of freedom? Freedom isn't a fantasy, Malcolm. It's a right. I opened the letter. Want to know what my father really thought of our marriage? Your father was a controlling old man who saw right through you, I cut in. Who knew exactly what you were doing because he'd done it himself to my mother. The difference is he learned from his mistakes. Lorraine moved closer to Malcolm, her hand on his arm. We should call Dr. Stevens. She's clearly having some kind of breakdown. Already tried that angle, Fiona said coldly. The lawyer shut it down this afternoon, along with that power of attorney request. Malcolm's face darkened. You went to a lawyer? Actually, the lawyer came to me. Apparently, my father arranged it before he died. I met his gaze steadily. He arranged a lot of things, Malcolm, including my mother's trust fund. Color drained from his face. What trust fund? The one you'll never touch. I pulled out the papers. The one that's going to fund my fresh start without you. He lunged forward suddenly, reaching for the documents. I jerked back, but Fiona was faster, stepping between us. The look in Malcolm's eyes in that moment told me everything I needed to know about who he really was. That's my cue, Fiona said, pulling out her phone. Should I call the police now, or would you like to leave quietly? This isn't over, Malcolm snarled, but Lorraine grabbed his arm. Not here, darling. Not like this. She turned to me, eyes cold despite her smile. You'll regret this, Callie. The running away won't solve anything. I'm not running away, I said. I'm walking away. There's a difference. After they left, Fiona hugged me tight. You okay? I wasn't, not really. My hands were shaking, and my heart felt like it might burst. But underneath the fear was something else, something that felt like my father's strength and my mother's spirit combined. I need to pack some things, I said, pulling away. I can't go back to that house. You'll stay with me until you leave for the new job. Fiona paused. You know they won't give up easily, right? Malcolm's type never does. I looked around my father's study, at the life he'd built, at the protection he'd tried to provide. Then I thought about my mother's trust fund, her own secret rebellion, her gift to me across time. Let them try, I said, picking up the photo album from the desk. I'm done being managed. My phone buzzed, Malcolm again. This time, instead of ignoring it, I blocked his number. Then his email. Then his parents. Each tap felt like breaking another link in a chain I hadn't even realized I was wearing. Dad would be proud, Fiona said softly. I touched the letter in my pocket. I think he finally is. A week after moving in with Fiona, I came home from the lawyer's office to find our front door ajar. Inside, drawers hung open, papers scattered across the floor, and my father's photo album lay torn apart, its pages strewn like fallen leaves. Fiona? My voice echoed through the empty house. No answer. My phone buzzed, an email from an anonymous account. Inside was a photo of my mother's trust fund documents, followed by a simple message. We should talk. Alone. Park. 7 p.m. I knew Malcolm's writing style. Even without a signature, I could feel his fingerprints all over this. "Called the police," Fiona said from behind me, making me jump. She looked shaken but angry. "They're on their way. Nothing seems missing except the trust fund papers," I finished. "I know where they are." My phone buzzed again. Another email. "Tick-tock. Coming." Fiona read over my shoulder. "You're not going." "I have to." I picked up a torn photo of my father from the floor. These were copies anyway. The originals are safe with the lawyer. "That's not the point." Fiona grabbed my arm. "He broke in, Callie. This isn't about money anymore, it's about control." "It was always about control." I pulled away. "But now I'm the one choosing where and when." Park was deserted except for Malcolm. Sitting at a chess table like this was just another evening game. He'd suggested we play chess on our first date, claiming it would help him understand how I thought. I should have recognized the red flag. "You're alone," he said as I approached. "Good. Where are the papers?" He smiled, pulling them from his jacket. "Sit. Let's talk like reasonable people. Breaking and entering seems pretty unreasonable to me." "You left me no choice." His voice hardened. "You're destroying everything we built." "For what?" "Some misguided notion of independence." "No," I said, remaining standing. "I'm building something new. Without you." "You really think you can manage on your own?" He laughed. "You couldn't even handle your own banking without me." "Because you never let me try." I met his gaze. "But my father did something you never did. He trusted me to make my own choices." "Your father?" Malcolm stood suddenly. "The man who controlled every aspect of your life? Who made you feel worthless unless you met his impossible standards? He learned from his mistakes. Unlike you." Malcolm's smile turned cruel. "Did he? Or did he just manipulate you one last time from beyond the grave? Trading his control for your blind loyalty?" The words hit harder than I expected, touching a doubt I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Had my father really changed, or was I just switching one form of control for another? "The papers," I said, holding out my hand. "I'll make you a deal." He pulled out another document. "Sign this. Transfers half the trust fund to our joint account. In return, I'll forget about pressing charges." "Charges?" "For embezzlement." His smile widened. "I have proof you've been moving company funds. My mother's already spoken to the board." My blood ran cold. He was lying, he had to be. But Malcolm had always handled the company's books, had access to all our accounts. "You wouldn't. Try me." He slid the transfer document forward. "Sign and this all goes away. We can start fresh. I'll even support your career goals within reason, of course." For a moment, I felt the old fear creeping back. The urge to give in, to keep the peace, to be the perfect wife he'd molded me to be. Then he heard silence. Malcolm's face changed. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I said, feeling stronger with each word. "Fiona called them. When you broke into her house. The house where there are security cameras." He grabbed for the papers, but I was already backing away. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the live feed from Fiona's security system. "I learn from the best, Malcolm. Just not from you." As the police cars pulled up, I saw something I'd never seen before in Malcolm's eyes: fear. And for the first time since my father died, I felt truly free. The police interview room felt colder than it should in August. Malcolm sat across from me, his lawyer beside him, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. 3 hours of questioning had cracked his perfect facade. "Mrs. Everett," the detective said, "we need your statement about the financial records." Before I could speak, Malcolm's lawyer intervened. "My client is willing to drop all allegations of embezzlement in exchange for—" "No deals," I cut in, pulling out a USB drive. These are the real company records. The ones Malcolm didn't know I kept. Malcolm's head snapped up. What? I learned from my father to always keep backup records. I slid the drive across the table. Every transaction for the past 3 years, including the ones you've been hiding from your parents. His face went pale. Callie, don't. The lakefront development project? I continued, watching him crumble. It failed 6 months ago. But you kept taking investor money, didn't you? Including from your mother. The detective picked up the drive. Malcolm lunged forward, but the officer behind him placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You were supposed to trust me, he hissed. That's what wives do. No, that's what marks do. I stood up. We're done here. In the hallway, Lorraine waited with Clyde, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. Is it true? She demanded. The development. Ask your son. I moved to pass her, but she grabbed my arm. We gave you everything, she said. Made you part of our family. And this is how you repay us. I thought of all the family dinners, the subtle criticisms, the way they'd shaped and molded me into their perfect daughter-in-law. You never gave me anything. You just took and took until there was nothing left. That's not true, Malcolm called from the doorway, handcuffed but still trying to control the narrative. I loved you. I protected you. No, I said, turning back. You loved owning me. There's a difference. His face changed then, vulnerability cracking through the anger. I didn't want to lose you. Everything I did. I was trying to keep us together. For a moment, I saw him as he'd been when we first met. Charming, seemingly sincere, a little broken. The man I'd thought I could help, could love enough to fix. I know, I said softly. That's what makes it worse. Please, he whispered. I'll change. We can start over. Lorraine stepped forward. Listen to him, Callie. Family forgives. You're right. I pulled out my father's letter, the one I'd carried since finding it. Family does forgive. But they also learn from their mistakes. I handed the letter to Malcolm. My father wrote this before he died. About how he almost destroyed my mother trying to protect her. About how love shouldn't feel like a cage. Malcolm's hand shook as he read. He was wrong about me. About us. No, I said. He was wrong about himself. And he learned from it. That's the difference between you. As the officers led Malcolm away, Lorraine made one last attempt. You'll regret this. You're nothing without this family. I thought of my father's study, of my mother's hidden trust, of Fiona's unwavering support. I'm not nothing. I never was. You just couldn't see me behind all the walls you built. Beside the station, Fiona waited in her car. You okay? I looked back at the building where my old life was crumbling. Malcolm would face charges. His parents would face financial ruin. The perfect family image they'd cultivated would shatter. I thought revenge would feel better, I admitted. This isn't revenge, Fiona said. It's justice. There's a difference. As we drove away, I realized she was right. Revenge would have been destroying them simply because I could. Justice was finally telling the truth about them, about myself, about everything. Ready to pack for Crawford and Mills? Fiona asked. I touched my father's letter in my pocket and smiled. Ready to start living. 6 months after Malcolm's arrest, I stood in my father's study for the last time. The house had sold quickly, too many memories for me to stay, too much potential for the young family moving in. As I packed the last box, something fell from between my father's old books. Another letter. Paper was older than the first one, yellowed and soft at the edges. Inside, I recognized my mother's handwriting. My dearest Alaric, it began. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not because I don't love you, but because love shouldn't feel like drowning. Take care of our Callie. Teach her to swim. I sat in my father's chair, letting the words sink in. All those years of strict rules and high expectations, had he been trying to teach me to swim in his own broken way? My phone buzzed, a news alert about Malcolm's sentencing. 5 years with possibility of parole. The Everetts had lost everything, their reputation, their savings, their carefully constructed facade of perfection. Last I heard, Lorraine had moved in with relatives out of state. Ready! Fiona appeared in the doorway, carrying another box. The movers are here for the furniture. Found something, I said, holding up the letter. Mom wrote it. Before she left. Fiona's eyes widened. Left? But I thought. So did I. I carefully folded the letter. Turns out there are different kinds of death, different kinds of grief, different kinds of love too, Fiona added softly. We worked in silence, dismantling the last pieces of my father's life. Each book, each paper, each memory carefully packed away. When we reached his desk, I found one final surprise. A small key taped beneath the drawer with a note. For when you're ready to swim. Key fit a safety deposit box at his bank. Inside was a journal, my mother's. Not dead after all, but living quietly in Oregon. All these years, my father had known where she was, had kept her secret, had let her go. He wanted to tell you, read his final note tucked inside the journal. But he was afraid you'd choose her over him. Pride makes cowards of us all. Don't make my mistakes, Callie. Don't let fear of losing love become a cage. 2 weeks later, I stood outside a small bookstore in Portland, watching a woman with my eyes and smile help a customer. My mother. Alive. Free. Different kinds of death indeed. I didn't go in. Not yet. Instead, I drove to my new apartment near Crawford and Mills, where a corner office and a team of my own waited. Where no one knew me as Malcolm's wife or Alaric's daughter. Where I could finally just be Callie. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and my father's photo album. The last page held a surprise, a photo I'd never seen before. My mother and father, young and laughing, with baby me between them. On the back, in my father's handwriting, remember, love sets free. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Malcolm somehow reaching out from behind bars. I didn't read it. Instead, I blocked the number and opened my mother's journal. Dear Elizabeth, I wrote on the first blank page. I understand now. About drowning. About swimming. About finding air when you need it most. Maybe someday we'll talk about it. But for now, I just wanted you to know I learned to swim. Closed the journal and looked out at the city lights, thinking about different kinds of love, different kinds of freedom, different kinds of strength. My father had taught me more than just rules and expectations. He'd taught me how to break free of them. Tomorrow I'd start swimming on my own. But tonight I let myself float, suspended between past and future, between grief and hope, between what was and what could be. And for the first time in my life, the water felt just right.